All right, so first thing, I'm just going to take Mark's map as an example and bring his into Unity. So I'm interested to see how this is gonna fit in terms of scale. So first thing you want to do is go ahead and make a copy of your map. I'm just going to call this test map. And then also we have a new map because now we're going to edit and strip this one away. I'm going to go and make a new document. New drawing. And now this one we want it to be a square because Unity likes all of the textures and all the images that come into it to be square units. It's just easier for the system to understand. Does anybody know why? Why like 64 by 64, 128 by 128, all the way up to like 1024 by 1024?
It has something to do with the pixels.
Yeah, it is. It does. So that's where those numbers come from, is basically 1024 by 1024 means, you know, that many pixels on the x-axis and this many pixels on the y. The reason why it's easier for computers to understand and process those faster is because they're powers of 2, right? So if you do like 900 by 900, yes, it's a square, but you know that's not a power of 2. So the computer can very easily divide very quickly that and process all of the information in the image. So we're just going to go ahead to in our new drawing here, and this is going to be our actual test map. So this one, the copy doesn't quite matter. The test map, we want to make this square. So we go down to page setup, and we can change this to custom and switch this guy to pixels. And for our map, we want to do something really large because this is just for us building this. We don't necessarily need this in the final product, so we can make it nice and large to showcase our map clearly. So now on our test map, the duplicate, I'm just going to strip away everything that's not actually part of what we're building in Unity.
You did 2048, right?
Yeah, 2048 by 2048. So I just want the important stuff that helps me build this in Unity. I can get rid of these reference images. The notes are definitely important to communicate, but when you actually build this in Unity, this is what you're going to be focusing on. So that looks good. Let's delete these. Why not? All right, so now I'm just going to go ahead and select everything that's left, everything I want, and just copy it. Come over to my test map and paste it.
How did you make the test map?
That was just a new Google drawing. So you can go File, New Drawing.
Okay.
And I just named it test map. And this is the one you want to make sure is square. So this one you go to the page setup and change it to 2048 by 2048 pixels. So now with this selected, I just want to move this in place. And now this is the one time you guys can actually scale your map, but you want to be scaling it uniformly. So I can hold down Shift and scale this. And now if you're by holding Shift, everything is going to scale uniformly. So if I don't hold Shift, see how I can move this like this way and it'll start to stretch? That's bad. We want to keep everything a uniform scale. And now you just want to do your best to fit this onto this image. So depending on the shape of your map, you know, if you have a more elongated map that's, you know, not as square, that's not a bad thing. It's just your map might be different in size. That's okay because when we get to Unity, we're actually going to recompensate for that and scale it up to be the size of our character. All right, so I'm just going to go ahead. Now that that looks pretty good, we're pretty much using as much space as we can. I'm going to go ahead and download this. So you go to File, Download As, PNG. And now whatever you name your thing right here, that's what the name of the PNG is going to download as. There it is. So now that we're inside of Unity, I'm just going to go to where should I put this? Let's drop it in the assets folder for now, and I'll find a home for it. So test map. Drop that in there. So there's my map in Unity, right, as a texture. Easy enough. Alrighty, so One way I show you, I think it's the quickest way. I'll show you both ways. Hopefully I don't stumble through the map projecting part. But I'll show you one way that I find is the quickest and easiest way to prototype and test, and say you want to just bring it into Unity, see how it is. You want to go back to Google Draw, make some adjustments, and go back and forth. I'll show you that way, and then I'll also show you when you're actually ready to build it, how you should set it up in the level. So everything I'm doing now is just a test, so I'm just going to do it in the hub scene for now. So all I want to do is create a level blocking mesh, and I'm going to create a cube. All right, and now on this cube, I'm going to give it a scale of 100 in the X and 100 in the Z. So big cube for us to walk around on. And just move this in place. That looks good for now. So we're going to end up moving the character and getting everything lined up. So this is where we're going to apply our map to. So the next thing we need to do is just create a new material. Let's call this test map. And then apply our texture to this. And now just take this material and apply it to this cube. Now you'll notice we've got 100 tiny little maps on here. Anybody know what to do to fix this?
Right there.
Oh.
Texture tiling.
Texture tiling. What was it?
0.01.
Yep, exactly. All right, because we take the inverse of that, and now it's going to fit properly onto that cube, right? But it's not yet. We're not yet done, because depending on the size of your map, we want to actually adjust to this size of the icon. Take a look at the size of this icon right here. This is actually resemblant of how big our player is. So if we go grab our player, actually let's just play this and see what it's like. Say we did it, like cool, we followed the instructions to a point. Let's see what it's like. I'm going to go to maximize on play. So here we go. Here's me as the character. So it looks like I'm a little bit smaller than I should be. So let's just actually test it out the level, right? So we can start to jump over things, crouch under, actually pretend like you're playing through your level. Get yourself a sense of time as to your distance between certain objectives, if the player's actually going to know where they go, things like that, and start to give some communication. So a lot of the spacing seems to be pretty good, but you could definitely tweak it and make it a bit better. So a good rule of thumb is we want our character's arm span or wingspan to be the length of that player icon. So just to do a test, and definitely just don't leave this as is, because I've seen this might be causing some issues with the character, is like rotating him and moving him, especially when it comes to making executables. So we're just going to do this as a test to make sure we see the size of our character. So yeah, it's a little bit large right now. So one thing we can do to compensate for that is just start to adjust this texture tiling on this object. And definitely do in small increments, because I feel like we're pretty close. So it is going to shift your map a little bit, but this is just getting the proper scale and spacing. So let me grab the character again. And definitely a little difference can go a long way. So just keep testing this and find what you like. And then also just test for your spacing at the same time, right? So if you have long stretches of hallway with nothing going on, use your phone or use another, use another a website or something as a timer to time yourself the distance between the start and finish. So that looks a little bit better. Definitely moving in the right direction. And this will give you a really good sense of if you have that 2 to 4 minutes of gameplay we're looking for, if you have the proper amount of time. This will really tell you a lot about your level, and definitely should get you excited to build it, because you'll start to visualize exactly what the player is going to see and what they're going to experience. All right. Any questions about that, using a level blocking mesh? No, pretty straightforward stuff, right? adjusting the scaling to fit the character you want, or the size of the level you need, I should say. All right, so one other thing I'm going to try out, hopefully this doesn't go poorly, is using the actual map projection. Put him back. So that was just a level blocking mesh. We have for you guys a student name folder. This is what you're actually going to start be using moving forward into level design. Question?
If you actually follow the instructions and don't do what you did, the character that is designated for the instructions doesn't jump properly. It just jumps and then moves back. So.
Okay, that has something to do. I know what that has. I found the result of that, and that's if you rotate the character. So notice right now, if I haven't rotated him, I jump. He jumps normally, right? And this is just a bug that I found, that part of how we have this prefab built of the character in the hierarchy, something's breaking with the grav null or the controls when we rotate. So now let's say I rotate him 90 degrees in the Y, or yeah, negative 90 in the Y. So now I think the character is going to jump to the left, no matter which way I'm facing, or the right.
Yeah.
So it's the opposite of whatever you rotate. So that's just a symptom with the character. So just a good rule of thumb, don't rotate them.
Rotate your map.
Yeah, pretty much. Or just when you guys end up with the hub, because in level design you're going to basically have the character is going to start here and walk into your level, and then so moving forward you don't need a reason to rotate him. But if I do rotate him in the instructions, I'll change that and make note that if you do rotate, it's going to cause you to have that jump. And that was before I had those instructions, before I actually found that was an issue. So in the student name folder, yes, you can eventually rename this. Don't go into level design with, or don't go into Des 3 with 4 student name folders for your whole team, right? You could rename this as your student name, and you guys will be using the same project going into level design. Hopefully we're not making any changes, so you don't have to get the latest of it. You can, if you maybe botched your character, or so you want to just get a fresh copy in case something was broken, and then bring your map into there, that's fine. This project template's going to be the exact same. So your student name folder has assets where you'll put all of your assets. So actually I'm going to go ahead and drop my map and my material in my assets folder, my student name, just getting it ready for moving forward. And now you'll see this LD student scene, which again you can rename to be LD underscore your name. So here I'm just going to drag and drop this into the hierarchy. So I have the hub scene and the LD student scene loaded. Oh God, that's a lot of grass. So let's see if I can do this properly. Always making changes to this. So the map projector, this is a volume that, as you can see, is projecting a material onto geometry. So what we do is we can set up our map to project onto geometry, and we can get an easy way to actually build this. So me personally, I prefer this way for getting your size down and getting everything's proper. I can do my best to show you how to rescale and get your size for the projector, because I know we have to mess with I think the aspect ratio, or no, the orthographic size. Yes, that's what we need to mess with. So, and you'll notice in here, what's really helpful is what the level design instructors did, is they threw in this nice little pentagon here. Well, you'll notice our player start icon is also a pentagon, so that should fit to that size. So it seems like I have some funny grass texture in here for some reason. So if I look for map material, there it is. So map material, this is the one we're actually projecting. So you'll see in here I, for some reason, have a grass texture. I don't want that. I'm going to actually add in my map texture, right? Drop that guy in there. And now my map is being projected onto geometry. So this one's a little finicky, to where you have to, almost in the same way the other one is, where you have to like move your projector and then also adjust the orthographic size to kind of scale it down and find where you want it. And pay attention to really how small that icon is. And now one thing about this that's different is that this doesn't show up when you're actually in play mode. This is just beneficial because I can actually start to project onto geometry. So if I go ahead and create, let's see, say I want to create a, I don't know, a wedge. Oh, it's because the volume's over here. So see that, how it's basically when you're inside the projection volume, it's actually going to project onto the geometry that you have in the world. And then what works with this is when you go ahead and play, that should be functioning. Oh, no, wrong way. It should be functioning with your mini map, if I'm not mistaken. No, I think we have to plug in the material. So as you can see, this isn't showing up when we're in play mode. So this is much better when you're actually building it in Unity. So you can lay out your geometry and project. And I think there might actually be, we were talking about adding in a toggle for it. I don't think it's in yet. But that'll be how you actually build it, is using the map projector. And then we can set up the mini map, which should be in the hub. The mini map you guys will eventually set up to have your map in there as well. Let me just check the God mode. Oh, projection. There we go. I think he added it there. So I think if I, wrong way again. There we go. So that, nice, and it's working with the minimap too. So that projection, if you hit GM enter, so that's God mode, and then enter, you can go ahead and turn on your projection. That's actually how you also enter God mode. When you notice, you'll go into first person, and you can pretty much fly around, and then you hit GM enter again, and then turn it off. So two separate ways to set up your map. Any questions all about that stuff? No? All right, definitely take the time to do so. Even if you don't want to make changes to your map, which I still highly recommend that you take a look at it once more, or after we do the final map reviews, take all that feedback into consideration. You can definitely learn a lot about your design and where, like if certain spaces are too small, if certain platforms are too small, it can really open your eyes and have you give you the ability to adjust your design one last time before actually committing to building this. And then also, once you bring your map in and you see these big open and empty spaces, or you get to the first week of level design and you're blocking it out using the level blocking meshes and things just feel open and empty, like stop, right? Just go back and think, all right, if my map was designed in a certain way but my level isn't coming out that way, it's the scale issues about setting everything up. Because I've seen a lot of very, very well done, thought out maps just end up as big open and empty levels because the scale was off and the student never corrected themselves before continuing. So this is a big setup step, so definitely keep it in mind and make sure you do so. Alrighty, so if there's no questions at all about that, what I want to do is I'm going to go ahead and open up Maya, and I'm going to work on a forklift asset that we have provided for you guys in the Asset Depot. So let me go ahead and bring it into Unity first. So I'll show you what we're starting with. So I'm going to import package, custom package. I'm going to go to the Scraps Assets folder, Scraps Asset Depot. All right, so now in here, let's see, we want vehicles, and right here, forklift. This is the guy I want to work on right here. All right, so you see we have an FBX, we have the material for it, there's a scene, a Unity scene, a prefab, et cetera, right? go ahead and import all that in. All right, that's going to go into my art assets folder. So let me go ahead and turn off, I'll delete this, and I'm just going to open up, I'll open up the rigid bodies scene, because this is technically where this would go, but we're not quite there yet. I like to give you guys this demonstration. It's not yet like worked into an assignment, so if I just connect with one person right now, I've done my job. I feel like I've accomplished and given back to you guys. So this is definitely really useful and not too technical in terms of Maya usage. So if you're afraid of Maya, we're not going to be modeling and doing things like that. We're just going to be editing a mesh that's already existing. So here's my prefab right here. I'm going to drop that guy in there. But pay attention to where this is just one solid piece, right? The wheels are connected, the forklift is connected. So after doing the wind turbine and the entryway, if we wanted to animate, a doorway and things like that, if we wanted to have this be a setup in our level where the player walks up to it and they, find the battery for it and press E and it starts to drive away, right? And then you can do something else and actually have the fork raise lift up, maybe move some crates out of the way and the player can walk through. We can't do that with this model, right, because it's just one solid piece. We can't animate the separate pieces. But we can actually, we can break that up inside of Maya, and it'll make our lives a lot easier to animate things like that inside of Unity. Also pay attention to the hierarchy, because that's one thing we're going to adjust. Oh, and that's in the wrong scene. Drop that in rigid bodies, set that one to active. So pay attention to the hierarchy. It's just this one object, right, in our hierarchy, one asset. So I've got Maya open. Oh. Yeah, there we go. So what's really nice too, I'll put this on screen, is Maya and Unity work very well together. So that was control space I hit to go to, I think it's called professional mode. So that just turns all the display off. But if you just take the forklift and drag it into, take the FBX itself and drag it into Maya, you'll see you get that little plus. That's basically how you can import from Unity into Maya. Real quick and easy. So now there's my forklift in Maya itself. So I'm just going to go back to this mode. All right, so again, if we take a look in the outliner, so Maya calls it an outliner, Unity calls it a hierarchy, exact same thing, no difference. All right, so if I want to change one of these guys over here, so here it is, outliner. There's a few different displays. I think this one down here, they have a split side by side. I can't quite see it on my bar there. But you'll see here's my forklift, and it's just called mesh, right? So what we want to do is we want to separate this out to actually have these different pieces. So what you want to do first is go to face mode, right? So right click and go to face mode. And now I can select the faces of the object, right? So if you double click on, say, the tires, what Maya does is it's going to select all the faces that are contained on that object. So when artists are creating assets for games, the motto that we are always taught as students were just shove it in. So you don't need, if you have like an arm or something coming off of a part of a machinery or a lever, you don't actually extrude that off and like have everything physically connected. You just shove the pieces into each other to make it seem like it is, because it's a lot cheaper on cost with geometry. If you have actually things physically connected, you have a lot of small little pieces of geometry that actually exist to create those. That's what they would do for film, because everything needs to be basically watertight, where you could cut it in half and fill it with water. In games, it's not like that. We use primitive objects and simple pieces of geometry to create a visual aesthetic. So if I look inside here, this is just that axle it's on is just a cube that's stretched through. And if I move these faces, you'll see that the tire just comes right off, right? Everything is completely separate, and it's literally just a cube, because you're not going to go down there, you're not going to see that as a player, so it doesn't really matter as much. So what I want to do is separate these off, because now when I'm selecting faces, that's all good, but I want it to be its own object. So I'm just going to go ahead and hold down Shift and then double click on all the tires. All right. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to separate them because I want to separate them, make them separate objects. So in the mesh window here, you're going to see these two options, combine and separate. And they do exactly what they say, right? So separate is going to separate them from this mesh and create a new mesh with each one of those objects. So I'm going to go ahead and hit separate. And now you'll see what Unity did there was it created child objects to this mesh object here. And pay attention to these symbols. This is one really nice feature that Maya has that Unity doesn't really do in any way is display the different types. So you see these are cameras. These are actual pieces of geometry that look like a little quad there. These ones are basically settings, so you don't have to really screw with those at all. And these ones that look like a parallelogram with an arrow, those basically represent empty transform nodes, or what you'd refer to them in Unity as empty game objects, right? Just an empty node in space that's part of the hierarchy. So now that we have our tires, did I miss one? No, okay, there's 5, good. Now that we have all those pieces, we want to clean up the hierarchy, and also we want to, take off this forklift too. So if we want to animate this, so one more time, I'll just double click on that, and this model is not a don't think that every model is going to be this perfect, where I could just double click and now magically it selects all the pieces we want. I did an example of a van or some type of other vehicle last month, and the door was in a way where you had to select the door and then the window and then the little bar that separates the two little pieces of the window. So this is just set up in a way very strategically by the artist that makes this much easier. If you find some assets on the internet or on the Asset Depot or even on the Unity store, they may not be this well constructed, but it's still you can still accomplish the same thing. And this, you can do a little test, move this up and down to see what the motion would preview like. Make sure you don't have anything weird moving or anything that isn't moving that should be. So now with that selected, I'm just going to again do a separate. And that broke those off there. So yeah, so now you'll see our hierarchy is getting a little ugly, right? We have all these empty nodes, and this, we don't necessarily want this. So what we want to do is unparent these and get these out of this hierarchy here. So what we can do is hold down Control to select multiple objects. And now you can't just drag and drop in Maya because there's more that goes on behind the scenes like you can in Unity. You have to actually use either key presses or down here in this window. So you have parent and unparent. So parent is just the P key, and a good way to remember it is you select your child first and then your parent. The last object you select everything will get parented to that. And then unparent is just Shift P. So that's just going to remove the objects you have from that hierarchy. So I just hit unparent and pulled these two guys out here. I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing for all these other poly surfaces over here. So again, that was Shift P. I'm just going to hit that on my keyboard. You'll see all these pop out. And now we can delete these, but don't do it just yet. Let's get everything all set up first. So one thing I'm going to do is just stay organized, is just label all this stuff. I'm going to say lift. This is forklift body. Tire 1. You probably may want to come up with a better naming convention than tire 1 through 4. I'm just doing it for speed reasons, but like front and rear is a good way, because you don't want to either have to remember that or literally click on every one every time to find the right tire, especially if you're animating them. But so just think about your naming convention long term and don't forget about stuff like that, because you will be working on a team. So now that we have all our pieces, we want to build our hierarchy inside of Maya right here. So we want the body to be the parent of everything. So if I move the body, think about it like a little toy truck, right? So if I move the body, all the other pieces go with it, but I can spin the wheels independently, and I can move that lift up and down independently. So does anybody anyone want to take a shot as to which objects I should select in what order? And then press P to parent.
Select the child object first.
Okay, which are what?
Tires and the lift.
Tires and the lift. Good. And then P. And now you'll see that the plus gets added there, and now everything in your hierarchy is, in order as I want it. So now you can do a test again, just like we did with the wind turbine, and actually move this around. So you can move this, see that everything moves with it. I can rotate a tire. Oh, and everything's at the center there. So this brings up a good point of I can physically move the pivots of certain objects in my scene itself. So to do so, with the move tool selected, you can hold down D. And now you'll see that little widget, change, right? To have the almost little compass inside it. So when you hold down D, you can actually change the pivot of an object. So right now, if I let go, you'll notice that's in the same place, right? So this is really helpful because you had probably seen from doing the entryway that where your pivot is on an object matters if you want to rotate it or animate it in a certain way. So this you can actually bring it into Maya and adjust this pivot going forward. And then so if I hold down D and now I press V, that'll snap to verts. See how it changes from a square to a circle? And this button up here is highlighting, so now I'm able to snap to verts. So I can just snap to the center of that sphere there and do a real rotation. So in Maya, in Unity, we can actually adjust that with this center and pivot button, but still very powerful to understand how to actually move the pivot of an object. Because when you export game objects to Unity, that information is stored in the FBX itself. All right, so you can select the mesh, and then with Move tool, so I press W to go to Move, and now D changes your pivot, and then basically V will snap to verts. So I can hold D and hold down X. X will snap to the grid. And another one, if I can blow your mind even more, is hold down C, and it's going to snap to a curve. So now I can basically, bless you, I can snap to like an edge and then slide along that edge. Mind-blowing, right? But really, verts is where you're probably going to be using more often. Maybe the grid, so D and V to verts. So now with the hierarchy built, I want to go ahead and delete the history. So what I mean by delete the history is you'll see if you select an object here, these inputs. Maya actually remembers every single change you make to every object, right? So all these inputs are stored, and eventually over time your scene can get very heavy with all of these, and you want to just keep it clean because that basically changes how small or large your file size is and how much is actually needing to be processed. So I'm going to go ahead and actually just go to Edit, Delete by Type, History. And now you'll see that the history is removed from there. So the shape node is normal. That's totally fine. That's supposed to be there. But those inputs are now been removed. All right. So now with that being said, you'll also notice when we deleted the history, all those mesh nodes were gone. All those empty mesh nodes, those have been removed. Is there any use for it? In my experience, I don't find a use for it. So like what the purpose of it is, say you've created like a cylinder and you made it 12 sides around, you extrude it, you add stuff to it, but you're like, oh crap, I want to make that cylinder 16 sides around. You can go all the way back and make that adjustment, but then Maya sometimes will break all of the other steps you did because now everything else was dependent on that. So in my experience, there's been small instances where it is good, like if you make a bevel on something, you actually cut into geometry, you can then go back and adjust it, but basically the farther down in history it is, the more likely it is it's going to break something. So it's good to just delete it and go back, or go back to like a previously saved version. And always a good step, if you guys really start to work heavily in Maya, either use Perforce because it's a great tool to work with version control, or save incrementally, right? So like forklift 1 worked for a few hours, forklift 2. So you always have backup versions. That's basically a workaround to not using Perforce, but that's a good rule of thumb to get into if version control isn't something available to you. But for this class and for this project, feel free to throw Maya files, throw yours, whatever you want into your folder on Perforce. That's your working folder. Do what you want with. All right, so now that we've got that, I'm going to go ahead and export this to bring into Maya, or sorry, to bring into Unity. So I'm going to go ahead and select all the pieces I want. I like to select everything I want in the scene. So you can do a file export all, but I like to, just out of my own experience, I like to actually physically select what I want, right? So I select all the pieces and only export those. I just like to have as much control as possible. All right, so now I'm going to export, and if you export this in the right location, it will open up right in your Unity project. So I'm going to navigate there. Oh, not compiled. Assets, I'm going to put in my art assets, forklift, 3D objects, and I'm going to just name this forklift, do forklift test, or forklift separated, things like that. So smoothing groups, this is important. This, you definitely want to check this, keep this checked on. If anyone knows the difference between hard and soft edges, that is what this controls, and I can take a minute to explain that in a second once I actually export it. Smooth mesh, keep that on. That should be about it. Your default settings will be fine. The only thing you want to do is make sure that you're exporting an FBX. That is really the go-to file type nowadays. It's holding a lot of very powerful information. It holds the UVs that we talked about a little bit. It holds any lighting information. If you have colors on your vertex or any other pieces of information on your geometry, the FBX holds all of that. So now I export that, go back into Maya, and now we see this forklift test. We'll go ahead and drag that guy in and drop it in. And now if you take a look in the hierarchy, take a look at my hierarchy here, right? So now I have this exact structure that I had inside of Maya. So now I can take this forklift, and if I change this to the center, I can animate this up and down, just like I was doing that test in Maya. Same thing, what's really powerful for things like this is, say I have this forklift, right, but you want to have another asset. Maybe you have a little stack of tires. Well, now I can just duplicate this, and now I have tires in my level. So if you see part of a mesh or part of an object that you want to utilize the parts of it throughout your level, you can get creative in a very simple way. So that took me just about 15 minutes, right, to explain it to you guys and showcase just how to separate the object and get it in. And now you can have like a stack of tires, or like maybe like parts of the forklift like damaged in certain places. So a lot you can do with this. I think it's really useful. You can have doors off of vehicles like just laying around on your level, things like that. And that's really going to set you guys apart, right? Because you can definitely go into the assets and just start adding assets, and the level's going to look great. But if you take it that extra step and animate certain interactions like this, or have these extra little pieces of debris, or have these little tires with a rigid body on them, and you could throw them with the grav null, right? Like that's the extra mile that we all want to see you guys strive for, and that's really what's going to set you guys apart from each other. So any questions at all about that? You want me to do it again? I'm totally down. Benjamin?
I'm running an older version of Maya. Will that the information used here conflict? Would there be a version issue? Or?
I don't think so. I know, unless you're how old is old?
14?
No, yeah, you're fine. The mesh and combine and separate are both in there.
Okay.
And stupid settings, go away. And since I mentioned it, I'll point it out. So you'll notice on some of these pieces of geometry to where you can't see the edges, right? That faceting is gone. So if I select the tire, Now I'm just going to go to this. So I held down, so if you hold down right click, right, you get this whole menu here, right? So this is selecting the different modes of your piece of geometry. So if you hold down control and right click, no, sorry, shift and right click, you get a whole basically set of options for what do you want to do to this asset, right? Or what do you want to do to this object? So if you're holding down in object mode, you get like extrude, insert edge loop, different things. If you go to edge mode and then hold shift, you get basically, you know, options for edge mode. So the shift mode, now all this is pretty much found in the edit mesh menu. Mesh and edit mesh is all right there. This is just a quick way and what I utilize to get to things like that. So basically what I was getting at with the edge mode is, so you have this soften and harden edge. So if I go to harden edge, I didn't do anything. Let me just create a cylinder. That'd be easier than, because that one's probably already set. All right, so that you may have seen in games before, right? Or you may have seen in, you know, in Unity or some of your own assets where you can see where one edge ends and where another begins, or where one face ends and another begins, right? Where you can actually basically see the edge of the piece of geometry. That's called faceting, and that's due to the edges being what's called hard. So every face has a normal, right? So this stuff is getting into, like, game development cares about this, and artists would care about this for lighting. But basically what you want to understand is that each face has a normal, which is basically a vector that's pointing 90 degrees off of the face of that, right? It's perpendicular to the face itself. So if I can actually show them, which is polygon display toggle face normals. Toggle. Yeah, I think it might. I'm gonna open 2014. But anyways, the soften. The soften mode basically is going to average those out and hide a lot of that. So that's a trick that pretty much all game artists use to, you have certain hard edges that are going to hold that you actually do want to see the difference. Oh, lame. And then you have the, let me just open up that one then. And then you have the soft ones that will actually average to hide that certain thing. So that's why those tires on this object here, you can't actually see them because the normals themselves have been set to be soft. So little touches like that will not make a make or break difference, but definitely are important to realize. So by default it should make them, wow, so I think by default it's making them soft, which is pretty impressive. So see here, basically you can't see where one ends and one begins. And now they're hard. So maybe if there we go, there's the face normals. So basically all that does is showcase each normal of each face basically pointing off. So every single face has one of those, and every edge has a face normal as well. So by softening certain ones, it's going to average those out, right? But now pay attention to where, see how this top one here is still hard? Watch what happens if I make all these up here soft as well. See that weird looking, basically now it looks like there's no rim at all. So you want there to be some hard edges, but having everything soft or everything hard is definitely going to cause some visual display issues like this, right? So you just want this rim here, this outer edge. This one is hard to hold that shape and hold the lighting information, because the lighting is calculating where one surface is and one isn't, where one ends and one is now perpendicular. So I got like 10, 15 minutes or so that we can utilize. To anybody like want to see anything specific in Maya or have any questions about getting Maya to work well with Unity? It's a whole can of worms. You guys familiar with insert edge loop? Yeah? No? I see a few heads, so I'll go over it. So, yeah, so really the shift, if you hold shift on an object, these two tools are like some of the best, most versatile tools that you can utilize, right? So insert edge loop, and if you go to the options, you have two good options you can utilize. So relative distance from edge, if you turn this off, you can put in one edge loop, right? And it's going to go an edge all the way around your ring of edges, and you can slide it to be where you want, right? So this is useful. So I could like very simply turn a very boring column into something a little bit more interesting, or a very boring cylinder into maybe some type of column or actually have some shape. So if you press G, that will always go back to the tool you recently had selected. So you notice I'll put in an edge, and now if I want to like scale it up to make it a little bit bigger, I want to go back to that tool, I can just press G again. So by doing this a few different times, you can really start to add some unique shape and create some columns or some type of statue in your level, right? Or maybe I've seen one person go from just a boring cylinder, bless you, into a very unique tower that was like a power plant. So, insert edge loop is very, very useful in that way. And then the other one, if you do multiple edge loops, you can basically adjust how many you want to put in there at once. So you definitely want to start small and then add your way up, but it'll add them in, and this will also add them equally and spaced out uniformly. So good piece of technology there. And you guys know extrude. You guys went over extrude, right, in design tools? All right, fun stuff. So really the pivot can be important as well. Since I made something, I'll just show you how to get it into Unity. And let's go ahead and throw UVs on it. Why not? Oh, but 2016 won't even let me open my editor. Lovely. Let's just make UVs for it. There we go. Done. So now this is where, if you're working with one unique object, so with this forklift here, this is like a larger structured object, and our body here is in the center. Yeah, the body of the forklift, right, is right at the center where the origin is. But this is definitely something to keep in mind, to where you want to have your pivot be at the, either you want your pivot to be at the origin itself, or the center of your object, right, should be at the origin. So say this is some type of like fuse or something I want to actually use the grav null with, and I want the pivot to be in the center. One thing you can do is use what's called the center pivot feature in Maya. So if you go to Modify Center Pivot, this is going to adjust your pivot to be in the center of your object. And I'll just go ahead and move it somewhere. And now if I want to go ahead and do so, it's just going to recenter it, average it out to the center of that object. You'll also notice some scale values on this guy with translates as well. We want to have that completely clean. We want to get all these to 0 and our scale values to 1, especially if anyone noticed trying to animate certain objects with scale values larger than 1 on them, you run into some problems. So what you want to do is, first things first, we're going to move this guy to the origin there. So I'm going to hold down X, and that's going to snap the object to the grid. Should. Alright, so now it's right in the origin. And now what we can do to get rid of these scale values, so I can't just type in 1 because it's actually going to scale it down. Maya has this feature called freeze transformations. And if the options box worked, you can actually choose which values to freeze. So I want to actually freeze the translate, rotate, and scale. So it's going to reset the rotate and translate to 0 and the scale back to 1. And one thing to notice is that it's not actually going to move the object. Object stays in place, it didn't resize, it just reset these values. Super powerful to be able to do that much at just a click of a button. So now again we can just throw this in our project. Assets. I'll throw that in there. Just keep it in the same place, and let's just call this fuse test. So now in here we have our new object, and it's super tiny. So what you can do is on the asset itself, this has to do with difference with the file scale right here. So what you can do is you can adjust the scale factor on the asset itself. Don't select the object and scale it here. We want to keep that at 1. You go to the asset here in the scale factor and start to adjust this. And once you type in a value, oops, you have to go down here and hit apply, and now it'll scale up to the size proper. That's just something to do with the scale difference between Maya and Unity. You can set your scale to be meters, but I've just run into some issues. Man, my options just do not open on 2016. None of them. Would you recommend updating from Maya 2014 to Maya 2016? No, I don't. Stay on 2014. It's got a lot of bugs. So yeah, I've noticed I can't open my UV editor for whatever reason, and now a lot of these options, so these boxes over here, normally this will pop open an options menu for you for this tool itself. None of mine work. So I would stay on 2014 if you still have it. And I'm going to get my license updated. So if anyone wants me to, I'll totally do that again with like a van or something different. This will be recorded so you guys can review. What?
I said thank you that you recorded.
Okay.
Because I'm like taking this all in. I'm
Yeah,
like,
yeah. Well, hopefully, if anything, what seeing this does is at least give you an outlook as to what you could possibly do in your level, right? So you could go through some of the assets, and now knowing that you can do this at just following along with me, or just breaking up this asset, hopefully that will inspire you to improve and adjust your design even further. So hopefully you guys continue to rework your maps and continue adding to your level.